Chance delay is an 8 HP voltage-controlled chance and gate delay module. It's a collaboration between Boddy of Tone Science and AJH Synth. It features 3 controls, each with CV inputs so that they can be controlled externally. Chance determines the probability of the incoming gate signal being repeated at its output. Delay determines the interval between the gate coming in and then being released at the output. And length, at its lowest setting, will repeat the incoming gate length, or as it's adjusted upwards, will apply its own gate length to the incoming signal. The module will then always complete this chosen gate length and will ignore any further incoming gate signals until it's completed its cycle. This means it can be used as a clock divider, and it can even be used to convert gate signals into triggers or triggers into gates. Or when pushed into audio rate, it can produce glitchy sub-bass effects, which can then be voltage controlled so they'll try to follow the pitch sense of a VCO. Both delay and length have switches determining the ranges of their time. In fast mode, the time ranges from 0.5 milliseconds to 2 seconds, whereas in slow mode, the ranges from 2 seconds to 30 seconds. This allows for a huge range of purposes that this module could be used for, from very fast percussion to very long drones and soundscapes. The CV inputs expect a range between 0 and 5 volts positive, and with a jack connected to one of the CV inputs, the corresponding pot then becomes an attenuator, limiting the strength of the incoming signal. This means that if the CV range coming in is higher, say 0 to 10 volts, then reducing the pot to about half would make sure that all that incoming CV remains useful. There's also a manual trigger button and an LED which illuminates whilst the gate signal created by the module is active as a visual reference, so you can see when and how long the gate signal is being produced. The chance function can be great for melodic sequences. Here I've got an 8-step sequence, and the gate out from the sequencer is going to the chance delay. Then the output of the chance delay going to an envelope generator, which triggers a sound. So if I reduce the probability from 100% down to 0, now you can hear there's nothing. But first I'll add in some analog delay, then I'll raise the chance pot so that the probability of a step occurring increases. In this patch I'm using a chance delay to simulate the effects of an audio delay, but instead of hearing a copy of the original sound, I'm using a second synthesizer voice to play back a different sound instead. The same 5-step melodic sequence is going to both voices, but whilst the sequencer gate is going directly to the first voice, a copy of that gate signal is going to the chance delay. And then I've got the delay setting quite long, so there's a substantial interval between the two sounds. At the moment this sequence is passing through the chance delay unaltered. With the delay pot turned all the way anti-clockwise, then the incoming gate signal will be repeated at the output. But as you start to raise the pot, beyond a certain point, it will replace the gate signal with a gate length that's determined by the gate control. This means the module can function as a clock divider, and if nothing is connected to the CV input, it will always honour the gate length set by the control, ignoring any incoming gate signals until it's finished its cycle. Here I'm going to use a separate CV channel from the sequencer to control the gate length per step. I've set the length control to full, then by adjusting the amount of CV on each step, I can tune the gate length to what I want for each particular step in the sequence. I'll also use another CV channel from the sequencer to control the delay time in the same way. Now I'll introduce a second sound to the right hand side of the mix, which is being controlled directly by the sequencer and so not affected by the chance delay. And finally I'll use the fourth channel to control chance, where some steps are set at a 50% probability of occurring. I'll also switch to another sequence which is controlling the same three functions but on different steps. Here I'm using the square wave output of a mini-mod VCO in LFO mode to trigger a simple percussive sound. I'm also taking a copy of this square wave and sending it to the chance delay, where it's triggering another, more brighter, snare-like percussive sound. I'll increase the delay time of this second sound to create a second beat between each of the square wave pulses. And to get even more mileage out of this square wave, I'm sending another copy to the tap tempo LFO, which I'm using as a clock multiplier in order to generate 4 beats between each pulse of the square wave from the LFO, and the output of this is triggering a hi-hat type sound. Next I'll increase the length time so that the duration of the gates that it produces lasts longer than the duration between the clock pulses or the square wave pulses from the LFO. And I'll change the rate of the clock multiplier on the tap tempo LFO to ×3 to create the impression of a 3/4 time signature. Then I'll need to adjust the delay time to make sure that delayed snare sound is occurring directly on the beat. Here I've set up two very similar sounds with slightly different envelope settings. This patch is creating a flam-like effect, where the same drum will be hit almost at the same time with a very slight interval either before or after the beat. And here I want to set the delay time really late, so that one of the sounds occurs just before the other and just before the beat. I'll increase the gate length so that the second version of the sound only occurs on every 8th beat. As before, this patch is built around just a single LFO, with one copy of the output going directly to one version of the sound, and then the other copy going to the chance delay. But I've also taken a third copy, which I'm sending to a second chance delay module, and that's triggering a bass drum sound. And again, I can use the length and delay settings to change where this drum occurs during the rhythm.